The following video is an analysis of the television program The Sopranos. Footage from that program will be used in order to illustrate parts of said analysis and will also be presented for critical dissection. This video will also spoil the entirety of The Sopranos. If you have not watched The Sopranos and wish to go on without knowing the mystery of the haunted gabagool that causes panic attacks, then you are advised to skip this video. If you have seen The Sopranos or simply don't care about spoilers, then let us, as they say in New Jersey, start that there video essay. I promise that will be the only attempted Italian accent in this entire video, except for James Gandolfini's.
Look, it's impossible for me to talk to a psychiatrist.
Well, you don't need a gynecologist to know which way the wind blows.
For those of you who have decided to stick with this video despite that warning, The Sopranos is one of those big tentpole American television renaissance shows you've heard so much about. I don't know why America thinks it invented the television game when England had 7 series of the British Empire end 2 years before it, but what do I know?
Faster, Gordon, faster! Oh, darling, that's not me!
The Sopranos is a show that wears many hats. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. It'll make you hungry. It might even make you question a few things about yourself. It's a program about family. 2 families. Our lovable murderer, Tony, has to juggle the demands of upmarket, upper-middle-class domestic life with a stressful competitive work life in waste management. It's just that sometimes the plastics won't fit in the recycling bin properly and you have to, squash them down a bit.
God, Mommy! Mommy, please, Tony, please!
Okay, scales fall from the eyes. We all know a show of pasta piled this high on tables is either going to be Alton Brown or there's going to be more rats getting whacked than a Hotline Miami episode set in a Chuck E. Cheese. But the show was marketed around family. Family redefined. If one family doesn't kill him, the other family will. Season 3 even got cheeky by labelling the show as America's most watched family. Hey, the year before The Simpsons had Saddle Saw Galactica and Hit the Alligator and Run, they were in no position to fight back. Tony's day family is pretty standard in setup, if not nuance. Nagging wife, overachieving daughter, shit-heel son, crotchety grandfather. Jesus Christ, this is The Simpsons. But it's Tony's night family that is the big draw. When the lasagna's burnt and AJ does that bullshit skip at the start of Rainbow Road that you know he didn't figure out by himself and watched it on a bloody YouTube video, big man Tony goes to his little home away from home and into the arms of his work wife, his favourite nephew, his play wife, and of course, Grandpa Munster. And it's Grandpa Munster, better known as Paulie and a lot less better known as Peter Paul Walnuts Gualtieri, that we're going to be discussing today. I know there's one particular guy who's been checking YouTube every day hoping that this very specific video will get served to him, and, well, brother, today's your lucky day. On the surface, not looking into it too deeply, then Paulie can come across as the absolute worst possible guy. Sure, The Sopranos has its big villains, like Don't Believe His Lies, the Shah of Iran, and a man who will cruelly and maliciously force a jacket onto you. But at the end of the day, it's a show about mobsters. What, did you think Tony and the boys are just sitting around planning next year's Christmas for the kiddies? Oh wait, they are.
Now you're going on Santa's list and you're getting nothing.
Fuck you, Santa!
While Tony will often try to rationalise or excuse his actions in his conversations with his psychiatrist, Paulie, while capable of introspection, always seems to come to the same conclusions. He's cruel, self-centred.
They know about the calling cards. I'm not in that.
Vindictive, needlessly provocative, constantly whinging.
John, when do I ever complain?
He's a skinflint. He laughs at his own jokes. He repeats his own jokes if he thinks an important person near him hasn't heard them. He's cowardly, a bit of a sex pest, and perhaps worst of all, he's a bit of an idiot.
Hell is hot. That's never been disputed by anybody.
But despite how negatively he's typically portrayed, he does get some moments that humanise him. He loves his mother, to a comical degree. He tears up when he hears his song at the Bing after being released from prison, and he even gets little idiosyncrasies that show he's not just a bad attitude and some fists, like his germophobia. Now, a lot of this is often used for comic relief. It's Paulie. He does the funny laugh, he does the funny point, someone whacks him in the balls, and then we can get back to the A-plot, where Tony's got to kill his best friend, or stop a gang war, or cheat on his wife with a revolving door of bad decisions. But Paulie's genuine malignancy is allowed to rear its ugly head on rare but important occasions. When he's forced to make some quick cash to get back into the Sopranos' good books after his usual snaky shenanigans, Paulie breaks into an old woman's house and, when he's caught and unable to wriggle off the hook, kills her. This isn't some gangland foe or mouthy underling or even a cop. Paulie is perfectly willing to be as beastly as his id demands, provided he gets something out of it and there's no risk of actual physical injury coming his way. The comic side of Paulie is the one way Sopranos often softens the character's nastier nature. The other way is in his relationship with religion and spirituality, and the two are frequently hand in hand if Paulie gets a subplot this episode. Paulie's ridiculous selfishness is combined with his fear of hell to have him try to barter with a drugged up and wounded Chrissy that a vision of the afterlife he saw while unconscious wasn't the fiery pit, no, but just silly old purgatory. No real big deal, don't worry about it. The blood on Paulie's hands is mixed with a visit to a psychic in order to result in Paulie chucking chairs around and screaming about black magic like a Warhammer 40k Inquisitor.
Fucking quiz!
And his money grubbing is tastefully blended with giving a tithe to a local church to show Paulie thinks Christianity works like a protection racket, and that Big J's looking the other way because Paulie's greasing his stigmata-ridden hands with dollar bills gained from selling a stolen shipment of
Pokemon cards.
All this is in one episode, by the way. It's Paulie's first real Spotlight episode, Season 2, Episode 9. But the tricky thing here, though, is that Paulie's attempts to call down an exterminatus on Montclair might, by some of the show's more hidden mechanics, be justified. There definitely is something odd going on in The Sopranos that isn't just a couple of trucks getting boosted or a friend of ours going off to meet with the fishes. In fact, bin bag aquarobics doesn't stop our man Large Cat popping up again, and I don't just mean in flashbacks. Phantom felines aside, AJ seems to hear his deceased grandmother haunting the Soprano household, probably complaining about her son not standing up straight enough at her wake or something, and all that's not even starting with the dreams. We've discussed Chrissy's trip to the Ninth Circle, but after a rounding with Gandhi or Mussolini's revenge, it's never confirmed who, Tony discovers who the rat is in his little organisation by talking to a fish in his dream, and the fish is right. And also the rat.
$4 a pound.
There's several other dreams in The Sopranos, brimming with symbolism, and 2 whole episodes have Tony living an entire new life in a coma that may or may not be him actually being invited to damnation by his cousin and the, for want of a better term, outline of his mother. In short, there are repeated moments throughout The Sopranos where the usual grey realism of the show has its lines blurred. On top of all the other hats it's wearing, Sopranos can get a little spooky. But how does all this mesh with Paulie? Well, quite simply, he's superstitious. Unlike the others, he's the only mobster who seems to believe all this, and he's painted as something of a sap because of it. And that's it, really. Paulie is the writer's way of highlighting the paranoid nature of being a gangster. That's it. Go home, that's the video. Oh yeah, we should probably talk about Our Lady. It's late in the numbers, episode-wise. We know The Sopranos might be heading towards its end state. Big players have been taken off the board. Things are looking even bleaker than usual, and for Paulie, that's no exception. He's recently been diagnosed with prostate cancer, meaning our skunk-haired protagonist, because he's our central character, not for the usual moral connotations that word typically has, is already feeling the dread, making him even more volatile than usual. Pick one of the wheel of negative traits Paulie has, and it's a good chance of being the reason Paulie shortchanged the festival the Soprano mob organised to keep up appearances. Though more directly, there's a new vicar in town, and he tries to cut a more favourable deal with Paulie for their help, air quotes, with this year's celebration. There's no hat, and people don't like that, but more importantly, a teacup ride goes on the fritz and people are hurt, including a child. Lovable, cuddly Bobby, who is with the Soprano crew but is more of a gopher than a button man, has his child and wife on the ride, but they are unharmed. Unfortunately for everyone, and I do mean everyone, like this is a bad thing for me and all of you watching, Bobby's wife happens to be Janice Soprano, sister of Tony and inheritor of the foul magics of Livia Blacktongue, an ancient and unfathomable dream demon. Channeling this dark power, Janice pushes Bobby to seek compensation for potential harm caused, resulting in a very public confrontation between Bobby and Paulie.
You owe me money, Paulie.
As expected, Paulie takes no responsibility for what happened,
I owe you shit.
and even seems offended Bobby would even suggest such a thing. Afterwards, Paulie happens into his mother Nucci, and the lovely old dear reminds him greed is a sin. Paulie's not been having a good relationship with his mum after it was revealed that she's not his actual mother, rather his aunt, with his real mother being a nun who gave Paulie up to avoid scandal. Of course, nuns are supposed to be chaste, so, parallels to the virgin birth, maybe? In this confrontation with Nucci, Paulie displays his views of greed as being a survival tactic, and then reacts in traditional Paulie fashion.
Fuck the 2 years.
That's when this apparition of Mother Mary appears to Paulie at the Bada Bing, and creepily, you can see it reflected in the mirror behind him seconds before it's revealed. It doesn't say anything, and it's gone as soon as it appears. It might just be Paulie's conscience getting the better of him. I don't find this very likely for two reasons. One, Paulie had his conscience whacked in '89 for mouthing off. And two, again, it's in the mirror before Paulie turns to look at it. This makes me feel like it's actually there, and it's not just a thing being perceived by Paulie, though I'll admit that's up for speculation. Spooked by this, Paulie scampers off to his mother's nursing home and seems to start reconciling with her. This woman has been the only character Paulie's been genuinely nice to with no ulterior motives throughout the entire show, bar their recent hostility. So here we have Paulie, this murderous, greedy, violent mobster, being given some fire under his arse and perhaps started to come good. But ultimately, this could all just be a flash in the pan, a momentary lapse of maliciousness brought about by God putting the frighteners at him. The big question is, can Paulie, potentially at least, be redeemed completely, not just as a character, but in the eyes of the Lord? I think that David Chase and The Sopranos as a whole is trying to tell us that yes, Paulie can change for the better. Now, I know what you're thinking. The Sopranos is a gunmetal grey show about mobsters shooting each other. Or it's about a bitter family man realistically struggling to handle his family life conflicting with his criminal career, or while trying to handle his own emotions. The show's not trying to make any big statements about God or religion, maybe a few passing ones, as religion is at least supposed to be a big aspect of the American-Italian mafia. It may be lip service after we shoot folk and sell drugs, but we'd still dunk our babies in the magic god water. Religion in The Sopranos is used more for ironic purposes, typically. Weddings get broken up by mob intrigue or the feds slapping chains on the father of the bride. The town priest spends more time trying to charm the local MILFs, eating their food and watching sappy movies from their state-of-the-art DVD players than he does actual holy stuff. He's less Father Brown and more Father Ted. David Chase, the show's creator and primary writer, has a complicated relationship with religion. He was raised a Baptist, and while he has said he's not sure if he still believes in God, he admits some of his old beliefs still linger in him, at least while he was writing The Sopranos. But he also can't bring himself to accept miracles. I don't believe these religious themes are supposed to be one-to-one representations of the character's actual Christian salvation. They're closer to discussions of their morality than anything else. This isn't about Paulie going to heaven, but rather Paulie becoming a good man and turning his life around. Paulie's importance seems to grow in the background of the show, especially when compared to the hardy to his laurel Silvio. Paulie goes from being humorous muscle to the instigator of the season 4 plot to finally being the last man standing of the Soprano crew. Hey, I said there would be spoilers at the beginning, you are not allowed to complain. Silvio, by contrast, is pretty stagnant. He stays in the same place, never really changes his attitude, and only becomes plot relevant if other characters are out of commission. Despite both characters being introduced right back in Season 1 and maintaining key places in the cast right up until the final hours, only Paulie truly has an arc, or at least looks like something in him has changed. The Paulie who patches things up with his mother is significantly different from the Paulie who abuses his leadership position over Chrissy every chance he gets. The Paulie-Chrissy duo do get moments of comradeship, but usually only after disaster, and the two are back at it again next season. The show itself seems to acknowledge Paulie's status as more prominent by giving Paulie something only major characters get.
What's the matter? What's the matter?
You're dragging me to hell.
A dream. Tony's dreams are well known, and Dr. Melfi gets a dream in the third season as a sort of way to give us in the audience the cheat codes to all the other dreams depicted in the show. Literally, that episode is about Melfi decoding her dream via symbolism, which will come in handy later in your watch-through. Chrissy and Carmela are arguably the next two most important characters in the show when you consider screen time and storyline, and both characters get important moments where they have dreams. While we never personally see Chrissy's dream of hell, the description he gives of it is very vivid. It's the impetus of an entire episode, and it may have ramifications for the very last episode of the series if you believe some people's reading of the symbolism. Carmela's dream happens a lot later, and people often glance over it. But the content of that dream shows the strange power dreams have in the world of The Sopranos. It's not explicitly supernatural, but it all but confirms the death of a major character to Carmela that had at that point been a secret to her. Carmela, on a conscious level, doesn't seem to understand the ramifications of her dream, but on a subconscious level, she's already come to her own conclusions. Well, it's that or a higher power lives in the Sopranos universe, throwing puzzles at people in their dreams. The only other significant dream in The Sopranos is given to our boy Paulie. And I do think it's important that Chase and the writing team were actively thinking about Paulie's internal mindscape enough to give him their equivalent of a character study, even if that study isn't as fantastical as walking a horse into the living room or getting sued by Buddhists. I think the most notable thing that happens in this dream is that Paulie asks the ghosts of one of the many men he killed a very simple question.
When my time comes, tell me,
Will I stand up?
It's a great little quote because it does two things. First, it seems to hearken to an actual biblical verse, Isaiah 60:22, when the time comes, the Lord will make it happen. I'm not a Christian, I wasn't brought up a Christian, I just read the Bible for the funny pages, I swear. This phrase is typically interpreted to refer to God's ability to bring about great and wonderful events, even from the most unlikely of moments, which mainly alludes to the fact that evil or dark things only happen for the ability to make greater goods come from them. On the other hand, stand-up here is used in the old he's a stand-up guy meaning to refer to loyal, reliable soldiers who act with honour and integrity. Hearing Paulie Gualtieri ask this is almost comical, and the silence in response is almost laughable, but the atmosphere is so oppressive and creepy, and there is that faint possibility that the answer might, against all odds, be yes. The fact that Paulie, of all people, is asking this question reveals something to us, that for all his bluster, backstabbing and general Pauliness, he cares if people think he's a stand-up guy. Now, he doesn't say this to secure any gain, he's talking to a dead man here. He says this because he's afraid he's going to be remembered as some thieving old clown who beat an old woman to death because he had to make up this week's numbers. If the answer he was going to get is that he won't stand up, then maybe Paulie might have resolved to do something about it. Post-Mother Mary Vision Paulie is a strange figure. Well, stranger than he was before, at least. Now, his cancer diagnosis does seem to be the major driving force behind the clipping of his wings, but after he beats cancer, he seems to be in conflict with himself. Sure, he tears up Chrissy's driveway after a spat, but when Chrissy dies, Paulie becomes morose and shows genuine regret over how he treated him in life. Paulie is clearly peeved more people attended Chrissy's funeral rather than Nucci's, but really, that's kind of reasonable. Paulie loved Nucci despite her not being his biological mother. Of course he's fuming about low attendance. I would be. I don't care if Fred Rogers is on the slab in the next room. At the very end of the series, Tony offers Paulie the chance to run one of the bigger crews in the family, if only because there's no one left except Patsy, the guy who hates Tony for killing his brother and pissed in his pool. Paulie is, naturally, hesitant to take the position, revealing his vision to Tony, who, of course, brushes it off as nonsense. Eventually, though, Paulie is cajoled into the role, with the mysterious cat that's been hovering around Satriali since Chrissy's death watching a sunbathing Paulie. This is the last shot we have of the guy in the show. This cat, despite clearly being an otherworldly spirit possibly summoned by the Revenant Livia Blacktongue, has a lot of theorising regarding him. The most common theory being that he's the ghost or spirit of Chrissy, come to watch over the figure that disturbingly might have been his closest friend in life. Other possible suspects for who this cat is include Adriana, who was often seen in cat print clothing and was last seen looking at a picture of Chrissy in Satriali's, in a kind of pining, morose, lost loved one kind of way. Another possibility is David Chase, who's observing his prediction for the future of the Mafia. With the old school now mostly in caskets, Paulie is what we've got to look forward to. Hell, the cat could even be God, considering all of Paulie's religious connotations, which would be great for this video, but, perhaps not supported by the text. Or maybe it is just a cat who likes looking at Paulie because it thinks he's got a skunk on his head. Whatever the case may be, if Tony really does get his insides made outsides at the end of the series, this leaves Paulie as the most senior active figure in the New Jersey Mafia, what with Silvio enjoying Norway. This means that unless Patsy fancies sitting in the Big C, or one of these randoms turns out to be Vincenzo Soprano, Tony's fourth cousin and hidden heir to the Baronet of Newark, organised crime in New Jersey is in the hands of this man.
He killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Guy was an interior decorator.
We are certainly supposed to notice Paulie as more than just a comedy thug. This ending makes that absolutely clear, but over the course of the 6 seasons, or 7 seasons, or 6.5 seasons, whatever organisational mess that mid-season break caused, and will continue to cause until the International Board of Television Nomenclature and Standardisation gets set up by me, we get more and more of something very important about Paulie's character. An aspect that stares you in the face whenever you Google funny Paulie quotes to send to your group chat, like,
Why don't you want to take your clothes off?
and that is his name. Peter Paul Paulie Walnuts
My name is Clarence.
Gualtieri. Over the course of The Sopranos, Paulie's name gets bigger as we go along. Richie Aprile reveals his nickname in Season 2, which never gets used again or explained, drawing our attention to Paulie's name for seemingly no reason. Later, we discover that Paul is his middle name, with his first name being Peter. Again, a strange naming incongruence, and while there could easily have been another Peter in the New Jersey Mafia that took precedence over Paulie in the early days, it's never explained why people refer to Paulie by just his middle name. There's plenty of possible reasons why, but the writers had to decide it, and they may not have decided that in the early days of the show, where Paulie was closer to background chuckling henchman number 2. Those first two names they chose are also very interesting. Again, there are a few possible reasons why these particular names have been picked. Some have linked it to a line from Goodfellas.
And almost all of them were named Peter or Paul.
Others have suggested that it's referring to Peter Paul Rubens, the painter and Johnny Sack's wife appreciator, but both of these feel a little stretched to me. I think it's interesting that both of these are well-known saints. This is very common in Catholic families, but the closest we've got to a Saint Silvio only got officially called Venerable in 2014. It's not a guarantee. Paulie, on the other hand, gets two big saints to call his own, and the choice of these saints, I believe, is significant. Firstly, let's talk about his first and lesser used name, Peter, who in pop culture is the saint who's often seen welcoming the dead to heaven. This gives us the impression of a gatekeeper, a man who brings others to the afterlife. It's probably used ironically here. Paulie certainly does help some people meet whoever's waiting for them on the other side, but perhaps this name has been selected, and at such a late stage of the show where everything's more or less finalised on the writing department side, to tell us who we should be looking at to see what's coming next for the Jersey Mafia. The future, no matter what it is, does have Paulie Gualtieri sitting out front waiting for the sun to come out in the New Jersey smog. His other, more prominent name though, is Paul. We are presented all the way through The Sopranos as this name being the most important, despite there being a more traditionally common alternative in Peter and a more colloquially acceptable one in Walnuts. This is trying to tell us that this is the name we need to look out for. St. Paul, while not being one of those OG apostles, was certainly a big name in the Bible, to the point where he wrote a good chunk of it. He was also a key figure in spreading Christianity in those early Beatles in Hamburg days of the religion, but also developing the church into what we know today. But it's not St. Paul's later adventures that attract my eye, but rather how Paul became a Christian in the first place. St. Paul also had another name he went by, Saul. And before his conversion to Christianity, Saul was known for one thing: killing Christians. The phrasing used in the Bible is intense persecution, but we know he stoned St. Stephen, and was even called the Pharisee of Pharisees, which roughly translates into modern speech as the guy who sells protein powder to the people who sell you protein powder. And this is all according to his own accounts, by the way. It's in the Bible, in his own words, how much he liked to kill Christians before he became one. It's like OJ's If I Did It, except he actually did it, and people love him anyway. The Jews should have just been honest. Forgive and forget, you know, it's the lying that hurts the most. And killing your wife, that probably hurt a lot too. Allegedly. Alleged by you. Anyway, Saul sees the light, Christ tells him to stop being naughty, and the apostle formerly known as Saul goes on to become the bedrock of Christian theology for years to come. I mean, I reckon. I'm cribbing most of this from the Weird Bible podcast. I reckon these guys know what they're talking about. I'd join the Appalachian compound with a manifesto and enough guns to force the ATF to shoot my dog. Getting back to the New Jersey garbage men, I think all these factors, the religious context of Paulie's story, the weird apparitions and signs, even the guy's name, is supposed to hint to us, the viewers, that even though Paulie has done some despicable things, there's always chance for absolution. There's always a chance to come good. Maybe not to come to God, but to change your ways. By Made in America, it's clear Paulie is hesitant about getting further involved in the mafia lifestyle, despite the guy living for the craft and having his own philosophy on how to be a better gangster.
Marriage and I think don't jive.
Maybe for Paulie that is turning to God and Christianity, or maybe it's something else. Perhaps with Paulie accepting the offer to take over the April crew, Tony has pulled another soul down with him into rejecting potential salvation for whatever reason. But I think Paulie ending on pointing his sunbathing screen what's it up and that darn cat watching over him suggests that even in this new position, Paulie has a chance of pulling himself together and out of the pile, unlike Tony, who's sitting in the dark surrounded by people he doesn't know. Behind the scenes, there's another reason I think the Soprano writers went with this direction with this character. Namely, Paulie's actor, Tony Sirico, was actually a convicted mobster who had done his time and turned to acting in order to get his life back together. The stipulation Sirico had with joining the cast of The Sopranos is that his character wouldn't become a rat or a government informant, seemingly so that the actual mob guys who knew him in real life wouldn't think he turned state witness in order to get out of jail. This means that from the beginning, David Chase and his writing staff had a character on their hands who was the ultimate self-serving, backstabbing, craven cheat who could not carry out the greatest betrayal one could in the mafia, blabbing to G-men to save your skin. Sure, Paulie found many new exciting ways to portray his oldest friends, including trying to stop up-and-coming fellow gangsters in the family from making names for themselves, while also straight up trying to flip to New York during season 4 because no one would come and see him while he was in prison for like 4 months. He only reaffirmed his allegiance to Tony by killing that old lady I was talking about early on, and he only did that because New York had no clue who the hell he was. I think Chase and the crew took inspiration from Tony Sirico's own life, having literally been a mobster who was guilty for robbery, extortion and assault, but who made a career for himself after finding something he was good at. Tony Sirico even had a recurring role in The Fairly Odd Parents. He was an advocate for animal rights. He did work for veterans charities like the Wounded Warrior Project. It's literally this story, art imitating life. So what does all of this, when taken all together, actually mean? Potentially, at least in late-stage Sopranos, the writers are using Paulie as a kind of mirror to Tony, Soprano, not Sirico, being a reflection of the traits he sees as foolish or weak. There are certainly parallels between the two men. Paulie's own cancer scare comes after Tony has a non-malignant tumour removed from his head. They do share a lot of their nastier traits like lust and greed, and if that's the case, perhaps the potential positive leaning of Paulie's ending is supposed to show Tony what he's missing. That chance of salvation is now permanently blocked off for Tony as he's committed to continuing his negative aspects and deserves what he eventually gets. I also think it's worth noting that Tony frequently blames his mother for how he's turned out, and a big point of conversation around the programme is how much Livia Soprano is to blame for Tony's actions. In contrast, Paulie and Nucci show that it's not just bad childhoods that create bad people, as much as Tony Soprano would like to believe. Paulie does all the horrible things he does, but he has a loving, caring mother, who he also cares for deeply. It's also entirely possible that Paulie grew up around gangsters and never really had an opportunity to break out of this lifestyle. Tony says in a couple of times that he did have an opportunity to leave this world behind, but Paulie may never have had that chance because of perhaps genuine ignorance of it. Maybe he was literally too stupid to understand the ramifications of what he was doing, or the world around him had forced survival techniques on him that made it impossible for him to comprehend alternative solutions to his problems, nature over nurture. By contrast, Tony clearly thinks he could have made something of himself if his reported IQ and his coma life as Kevin Finity are anything to go by. My final conclusion about all this is that Paulie, as a character, didn't start out as a fully fleshed out person. Nor did the writers think all the way back when Tony was eyeing up Dr. Melfi's statue that Paulie would be the last man standing when the dust settled. But as the chips fell and the cards were played, they found a story emerging from hints and side comments that they eventually latched onto, crafting a narrative of at least potential redemption in that bleak, grey final season, where the world seems to be rotting around the characters. I hate to do this because it's such a cop-out, especially on the first video out, but ultimately it's up to the viewer whether he can change. I hope I presented the puzzle pieces to you in a clearer way than the show does. The finest quality of The Sopranos is that it's hundreds of little stories dovetailing into each other, working to construct a whole with enough ambiguity to create discussion, while also answering questions enough for the audience to feel satisfied, except perhaps that big last one. Take what you will from this, but if you want to know what I think, well, I think the story of Paulie Gualtieri is designed to do one thing, and that's to make us, the audience, ask, when my time comes, will I stand up? Dr. House, I've got a confession to make. I've hired some Italian men to kill the fattest man I know. I do not regret my actions.